Today, we're unpacking some absolutely fascinating source material that breaks down the mechanics, the psychology, and frankly, the controversies behind Elon Musk becoming the world's first trillionaire. This is a story that goes way beyond your standard business success. We're going to look at the raw numbers, the hidden strategies, and the real societal impacts of wealth on a scale that human history has literally never seen before. So here is what we're looking at today. We've got 1. The trillion-dollar scale. 2. Paper wealth versus liquid cash. 3. Selling dreams over fundamentals. 4. The buy, borrow, die strategy. 5. Politics and wealth generation. And 6. The true cost of hype. Let's jump right in. All right, section 1, the trillion-dollar scale. According to the source, picture this. It's June 12th, 2026, the exact moment SpaceX debuts on the NASDAQ. Musk's net worth hits $1 trillion. 1 trillion! To put that into perspective, that is a sum larger than the GDP of all but 21 countries on Earth. Literally, if you spent $1 million every single day, it would still take you over 2,700 years to run out of money. It's just wild. To help our brains actually grasp this scale, because let's face it, a trillion is almost impossible to picture, the source uses this brilliant analogy about time. Think about it. If you go back 1,000,000 seconds, you're looking at about 11 and a half days ago. Pretty recent, right? But if you go back 1,000,000,000,000 seconds, you are traveling back 31,000 years. That is long before human civilization even began. That right there is the mind-bending chasm between being a millionaire and a trillionaire. Moving right along to section 2, paper wealth versus liquid cash. You might be wondering, how does someone actually hold $1 trillion? Well, based on the transcript, they don't exactly have it sitting in a checking account. In fact, only 0.1% of Musk's wealth is actual liquid cash. The other 99.9%, it's locked up in paper wealth, specifically his 38% ownership of SpaceX and up to 25% of Tesla shares. And here is the kicker. He can't just sell off those shares to get the cash. If he suddenly flooded the market with his stock, investors would totally panic, assuming the companies were in trouble and the market value would absolutely crash. So, in reality, a huge chunk of this wealth is just a number on a screen, riding completely on the market's mood. Which brings us to section 3, selling dreams over fundamentals. So if companies like SpaceX are reportedly bleeding money, operating at a massive $5 billion loss in 2025 alone, how on earth do they reach trillion-dollar valuations? The source explains this using economist Burton Malkiel's castles in the air theory. Basically, it suggests that investors aren't looking at the boring current financial reality like revenue or profit margins. Nah. Instead, they're buying into a charismatic founder's futuristic promises. They're investing in psychological value. The crucial takeaway here is that the valuation basically floats completely untethered from the actual foundational metrics. The material really highlights how this hype can clash with reality by tracking a whole timeline of unfulfilled predictions. Remember the Hyperloop in 2013? That 600-mile-per-hour transport dream was eventually wound up in 2023 without a working product. Or how about in 2014, when we were promised humans on Mars within a decade? Then in 2015, fully autonomous self-driving Teslas were just 3 years away. In 2019, it was 1 million robotaxis on the road by 2020. You see the pattern here? People buy into these massive, visionary dreams, which drives the stock price through the roof, even when those deadlines quietly come and go. The transcript captures this dynamic perfectly by highlighting the perspective of Steve Eisman, the famous investor who actually predicted the 2008 economic crash. When looking at the SpaceX situation, he straight up calls the valuation madness. He says, and I quote, "This is an IPO of a sci-fi story tailor-made for a sci-fi cult." He's arguing that this whole thing caters directly to hardcore science fiction fans rather than serious economic investors who actually care about reading a balance sheet. Okay, on to section 4, the buy, borrow, die strategy. So, if all their money is tied up in paper stocks, how do these billionaires actually buy yachts and fund their lifestyles without taking a highly taxed salary? Enter the buy, borrow, die strategy. It's a 3-step playbook. Step 1, buy and hold. Keep your wealth locked up in unsold shares, which completely avoids income and capital gains taxes. Step 2, borrow. You use those ultra-valuable shares as collateral to score massive, low-interest bank loans for your everyday spending. And guess what? Loans aren't taxed. Finally, step 3, die. Thanks to U.S. inheritance tax loopholes, they can pass those untouched, highly appreciated stocks down to their heirs tax-free. The heirs then sell off just a tiny sliver to pay back the original bank loans. The data points to a pretty staggering disparity here. From 2014 to 2018, Musk's wealth shot up by nearly $14 billion, yet his effective tax rate was a tiny 3.2%. Compare that to your average working class American, who's usually hit with a tax burden of 20 to 30% on their income. As the source notes, it's a completely legal setup, but it drastically shifts the societal tax burden away from the ultra-wealthy and right onto everybody else.
All right, Section 5, Politics and Wealth Generation.
According to the source, the final puzzle piece in building this trillion-dollar empire is heavily tied to political lobbying and favorable regulatory shifts. It draws a very direct line between the 2024 US elections and the explosion of this specific fortune. The material points out that Musk reportedly donated $290 million to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And the source claims that in return for becoming a primary political donor, following the election victory, his network essentially multiplied fivefold. All thanks to direct political and regulatory favors that benefited his companies.
The transcript neutrally lists several of these resulting controversies that facilitated this wealth boom. We're talking about 40 dropped federal investigations against Musk's companies, the FCC granting Starlink a massive monopoly over tens of thousands of low Earth orbit satellites. But perhaps more critically for that trillion-dollar valuation, it mentions accelerated NASDAQ listing rules, specifically the fast entry rule, which forced average American retirement funds to invest in SpaceX early. On top of that, it points to relaxed SEC safety protocols pushed through just 2 days before the SpaceX IPO. This basically put billions of dollars of regular investors' money at a much higher risk just to ensure the listing happened smoothly.
And finally, Section 6, the true cost of hype.
To really grasp the real-world impact of all this, the source compares Musk's $1 trillion paper wealth against a pretty sobering statistic. According to the UN's World Food Program, it would take an estimated $40 billion to literally end world hunger by the year 2030. $40 billion. That is just a tiny fraction, like 1/25th of this single individual's paper net worth. The findings really emphasize that while we love to celebrate this kind of insane wealth generation, having so many resources tied up in these paper valuations carries a very real, very heavy opportunity cost for the rest of humanity. As we wrap up this explainer, the source leaves us with a really critical question to chew on. When we peel back all the layers, the futuristic hype, the carefully manipulated stock market psychology, the immense political lobbying, and those massive tax loopholes, what exactly are we investing in? Are we, as a society, rewarding foundational value that actually builds a better world? Or are we just blindly financing a trillion-dollar illusion? It is a heavy question for sure, but one the source strongly urges us to consider before we buy into the hype. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped you unpack the reality behind the numbers. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.